Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.
And this month, as we already know, we're going to be celebrating female entrepreneurs and women leaders all over the world. And today we are having the wonderful Kitawa Wemo from Kenya. Can we please have drum rolls for her? Yes, thank you. All right, so Kitawa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Mama Social Ventures?
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I think it's just a pleasure to be able to connect with people from across the world. I think that's the beauty about COVID. We're just able to do this seamlessly. In other times, we'd have excuses and say, no, there's no way someone in Nairobi can be part of Startup Grind in Nigeria. So that's, I think I'm fascinated to see how that is. But Mama Social Ventures is a company builder. So what that means is we work with early stage entrepreneurs, especially female founders in East Africa, to between idea and market. So whereas it takes an average person about 3 years to get to market, we're able to do this through our systems and networks and investment on the business in 6 months. Actually, our best business was able to go to market in 4 months and able to take our product to market and export in 4 months. So that's what Mama does, in very few words.
Tell us what inspired you to start up Mama Ventures.
All right, starting Mama. I think that's an interesting story to tell because I started it just fresh out of college. So my first official work experience was working from Nairobi, and I think I had the option of picking to work in, and I think I picked working in this Maasai community town called Kajiado. And the reason why I did that is I was a bit curious to see how people operate beyond the major cities. And when I got there, I think it was just an interesting perspective to see the different ways that culture really affects business and how people operate, and seeing how majorly sidelined women and girls were from the system itself. Yet you're able to find that women and girls are the ones who do the most work. So for instance, if you look at the culture of the Maasai, it's the woman who takes care of the cows and the goats and the kids, takes care of the house. They're the ones who, if there's a hole in the wall, they're the ones who fix it. And the men literally just sit around and talk all day. So seeing just how much work they were doing, and then how much then the system also sidelined them, really just put it in my head that I needed to do more instead of just being comfortable with the privilege of having access to opportunities as a girl who's grown up in a say Kenya's third largest city. So that's where the idea of Mama was born. I registered the name, I found a co-founder, and we decided to just try and start building an entrepreneurship toolkit focused towards communities. So that's where the journey of Mama started. And what we did is we partnered with an organization called Girl Aid Foundation and started running entrepreneurship classes with teenage girls in rural schools. Because we did think that for us to make a difference, that we needed to begin educating them about business at a very young age. And of course, it was an interesting learning experience to see how unsustainable that could be as well. And so we then transcended into the startup ecosystem in Kenya to then when we started, we were literally working with everyone, not just women, but we did stick to the core calling of Mama, which is nurturing of businesses. So anytime someone asks, what does Mama really mean? Truly, it means nurturing, because Mama is Swahili for mother. And I think that's what we thought we were doing to early stage entrepreneurs who really didn't have a lot of support and a lot of barriers for them to get to market. So that's where we started. And then towards the end of 2017, we then decided to 100% focus on females, because we saw that there was a huge gap for them in bringing their products to market and seeing the challenges and barriers that came with them wanting to build businesses. And so that also really marries to what Mama means. Mama is a woman, so we are nurturing female businesses. So it's very wholesome now for Mama.
That's very interesting to know. You know, while we were having the background conversation, you told me about how passionate you were about culture and strategy. I think I know where that's coming from now. And then we seem to have a lot in common, because there are actually some tribes in Nigeria where the females are actually the enterprising ones. They are the stronger ones. They do all the work, farm work, house chores, everything. And then the men just sit around drinking gin with respect. With a lot of respect to the male gender. But there are actually some tribes in Nigeria that are believed to be like that. So having worked with female entrepreneurs and being a female entrepreneur yourself for quite a number of years, what are the challenges that are mainly associated with women running their own businesses or enterprise?
So I think to be able to answer that question, it's about understanding that the challenges exist for African and misunderstood in terms of resources and the potential that we have. And I always laugh and literally fit China, Europe, US, and India in the continent of Africa. It's severely underrepresented as to how huge Africa is. We have thousands of languages. We have political instability and volatility in different countries. And these different barriers already just present a high element of risk when you're starting a business. Because I think it's more comfortable for me to go through an education, which is something that's highly acclaimed in Africa. I think there's no country in Africa where education isn't the first thing that you can also create jobs and employ people. So there's a mindset of the culture that we are and the culture that we've come from. Because the culture that we came from, unfortunately, is that of a colonial mindset where you have to work in the farms of the colonialists. Like, I have to go and build someone else's business. And that has been what we have been exposed to for, decades, looking at the earliest countries that got their independence. And then you're looking at now a transition of the millennials who are getting a bit more, and the baby boomers who say, I can actually build my own business. But already the traditional systems that exist are not built for us to run businesses, but for us to work for people. So I think one is just understanding that where we come from and our history as Africans has always been to work for other people. I think the most controversial topic that we're talking about across the world is Black Lives Matter. I think you look at Africa and the downfall of Africa, the dark ages of Africa, came from the transatlantic slave trade and the Arabic slave trade. We were always removed and pulled out of the continent to go and work for other people. And this has gone on for centuries upon centuries. And now we are looking at changing the narrative and becoming more, I've seen a lot of Africans dropping their Christian names and owning who they are and their culture. And I think there is beauty in that. And that means that we're already looking to beat those barriers ourselves, understand who we are and our roots. And so just to answer your question, I think from talking about history, and I always bring up the topic of history when I'm dealing with businesses, because it allows us to see the world in a different light. it allows you to get into business to see the barriers that exist. And so for women, then it gets even harder, because with the exception of how we've been socialized, the fact that we don't have a common currency in Africa, the minute I leave Kenya to go to Uganda, I cannot use my M-Pesa. I cannot use my currency until, I have to change my money. The minute I cross the border, there's certain things and that happens. Imagine that happening 54 times. Every time you cross a border, you have to do, it's more expensive to travel to South Africa than it is to travel to, say, the UK. It's really, really hard. The amount of money I'll have to pay to get a passport, to get my visa, to get to those countries is very high. So I think the barriers that exist are, of course, of a geographic nature, of an economic nature, of a political nature. But then for women, it's a bit of understand where it came from. Because if you look at us hundreds of years ago, we women still were very strong, and we had a voice in the community. You would see council of elders that are women-led. We saw women taking their communities into war and fighting to defend their people. So I don't know where we dropped the ball and where that changed. But owning a business is not easy for a woman, because you also have to juggle. You have to juggle between being maybe a mother. You have to juggle between being a woman. You walk into a room and you understand how many barriers exist for you. And so building a business for us and supporting women to understand the challenges that they enter the market with actually doesn't even come from a strategy point of this is how your books need to look. What we do at Mama is actually go down to mindset and go down to your culture and go down to your roots. So you can understand yourself better, the market you're getting into. So that it's not necessarily to say, of course, there's a whole of women owning their rights and getting better representation by the policies around them. But it's also for a woman to understand that this is where they're going into. This is the challenges that exist, and they need to be prepared for it. So I love saying that we do a reverse engineering model. So in terms of the challenges, those are the major challenges. As an African, you are already challenged being an African. And I always, maybe to also add is just, I was laughing and watching something the other day that it cost $40 to bring a bag of wheat or a ton of wheat from the US to a port in Mombasa, but it costs about 30 times that to take it to Uganda, which is just less than 2 days away. So already, so that's, you're seeing, even for how we are able to take up technology from other places, it's easy for other people to set up businesses here, but there's already barriers if you wanted to set up a business anywhere else. So I think the challenges are vast for Africans in general. Then you are a woman, then you are a certain age, then you're an unmarried woman, or you're a single mother with children, or you're a married woman with children and a husband. There's already so much that you have to. Why I'm very passionate about supporting female entrepreneurs and actually building businesses while understanding that these are the challenges they have to get into the market with.
Wow, you've shared a lot already. Thank you so much. A conversation I had some time ago, I attended the Africa Youth Connect in Kigali, Rwanda in 2018. And then I remember a whole lot of possibilities that Africa can embrace Pan-Africanism. Imagine the bag of weeds for $40 from the US costing almost 30 times more. So I was talking about the conversation around Pan-Africanism. What do you think the conversations further about eliminating the trade barriers we have within Africa?
I think the trade conversation is one that has been, there was a resolution to build a free Africa trade It was something that the presidents were signing to do. And I think that's a conversation that policy needs to have in conjunction with governments. The fact that, yes, if you look at economies that are doing much better than Africa, there is a certain unifying factor when it comes to how they move around and how they operate. I think and the thing is, we do have all these institutions put in place. We have the East Africa Commission, we have the SADC, we have COMESA, we have I'm not sure what exists on that side, but there is and we have the Africa Union. We have all these unified bodies that could be facilitating better trade, fair trade, better wages, less taxes, or just more wholesome way of conducting business. And I think it was interesting because there's a few things that we've wanted to do across our borders to even as close as Uganda. But the levels of barriers that exist then just make you stop doing it, because you're wondering, should I put my capital into getting this this license or this whatever you need to get to then, or permit to then work in a different country or to conduct business in that country. So even in terms of scaling and having conversations for startups to scale across Africa is a long ball. It's very hard. And so there needs to be more conversations on implementing that. And it's very interesting to see that when we had COVID, for instance, in Kenya, suddenly our factories were open and we were making our own protection equipment, our PPEs. And half of the country was saying, oh, so we do have the resources and the equipment to make all these things, but we do import, and so many other conversations. We made a ventilator in a university in Kenya to deal with COVID. So is it that now in the time of a pandemic that then we do see that there exists the right policies and exists the right infrastructure to then do
Thank you very much, Kitawa. And then, like I said, Kenya and Nigeria seems to have a lot in common. Talking about COVID-19 and its impact on women-owned businesses, I'm going to let you share a little bit more on that. But the same happened when COVID first started. We were very concerned about importing nose masks, hand sanitizers. And then when the borders began to close, in fact, those people who already imported the nose masks and sanitizers, the prices just shot up, like it just skyrocketed. And then this, well, for a reason we cannot explain, we just keep relying on importation. So I'd like for you to share with us what impact COVID-19 has had on women-owned businesses and on businesses generally. And do we envisage more change post-COVID-19? Are there going to be more changes?
I think the thing about COVID is, I think it just leveled the playing field for many people, especially in business. And it's difficult to now conduct business in older ways. But I think there is an opportunity there for all businesses. The continent of Africa has over 1.2 billion people, and majority of African population is young. And we're at the cusp of transforming how we operate. And I think the opportunity is in seeing that we are really transitioning from more of a manual system to digitizing our system. You're seeing more people having access to technology, but the issue, and as we are seeing, like just how good it would be for us to have a better connection of internet to be able to work with each other across our borders. That would be interesting. And the thing is, our problems, African problems, are similar. The way we speak, and you're saying this is very similar to what we're having in Nigeria. And there's certain things I'll read about Nigeria that are very similar to the things that we are having in Kenya. But I think the biggest challenge is just understanding that a woman has a lot of responsibilities as far as family is concerned, and as far as just at least for majority of the women. You are building a business and you have a child or a husband and all these things. But I think that is something that we need to get into a market knowing. I think if I'm setting up a business, it didn't come to a surprise to me that I'm a woman. And that is the truth, that it's not a surprise. I was born a girl. I was born a woman. And understanding that I was born a woman with all these challenges that exist for me, or the blessing that exists for me as a woman, then I need to create systems to allow myself to operate. And it doesn't actually, and why I really shy away from comparing female businesses and male businesses, I think the only purpose that Mama exists for is for capacity building and resource support for women. And when we say that, it's about creating digital support, digital capacity for women to access the opportunity to grow, to allow them to do other things. And I like entering into a space where I'm already challenged, because it allows me to see how I am challenged and allows me to innovate around that and build companies that can exist without me being there. So I think what I'd like to challenge female businesses is not entering to say culture or, I'm already predisposed to a very tough world and that's my excuse. I think it's my doing to say, as a woman, as a female CEO, you have all these things that will happen, and can we digitize your company to allow you to be a mother, to allow you to be a woman, to allow you to have 4 days, 5 days, 1 week of rest because you're on your period and you cannot work for some of us. So the question is that for COVID, I think it has pushed the rest of African businesses to understand that there is a need for technology to be included in our systems. And we need to create systems that allow us to use technology to grow.
I'd like you to share a little bit on how women can be supported in, because that's the theme for this event. How can women be supported in a changing world like ours? We already talked about the need to include technology. Are there other things that you think we can take a hold of to ensure that we do better business-wise?
I think, of course, there's still so much more that can be done for women, and it's not to say that everything is perfect right now. No, I think we have a long way to go in supporting women in business, in helping them access finance and credit, in helping them own more assets, in assisting them to be able to have a seat at the table for sure, and a table that then makes decisions. I think there is need for us to have more support from civil societies and the legal space, to have more people, not necessarily just women, but more people lobbying for the support and the inclusion of women in the existing system. I think what the conversation has been and what I have seen is there is a whole lot of talk on female support. And I would say that there is a lot of men who then say, why are female applicants encouraged to apply for a job? Or why is there a certain preference given to women when it comes to opportunities and jobs? That conversation is happening online. That conversation is happening in conferences. But the conversation still walk into a room. And I have these conversations with men who, have the other argument of there's a lot of opportunities for women. The reason women are being encouraged to apply is because there's no women in those rooms. There's no women in those offices. Technology being at the top of the list, that there's hardly any women there. Politics being a place where women are not there. You look at a picture that was taken with Christian Lagarde, and they were discussing about the world's status in terms of the economy. And she was the only woman, Africans in the room. And we're discussing obvious sidelining of females. And for female entrepreneurs, it's even worse, because being an entrepreneur in Africa is a joke for people who are in the traditional system. Go work in a bank, go become a teacher, go, become a nurse, go become all these things. So the thing is, yes, there has been, and if you look at statistics, that there's been more women, more female-founded businesses in Africa. In fact, majority of the businesses founded, okay, out of this thousands and hundreds of thousands of businesses founded by women, how much money do they turn over in a year? Okay, we could have 10 women and 1 male, and the one man's annual turnover is $1 million, and the women literally have the specks and the crumbs of what's left of that market. So we might have more women, but still the access to all these markets and all these opportunities is highly, highly sidelined. And this is because even when you look at business, it's more about, yes, I might have a good business on paper, but I also need to have a better grasp of the market on the ground. So yes, we need other people to assist in lobbying, assist in seeing that there is a huge disparity in that space, but there's also need for us women to then build stronger businesses. By default, you just have to build a stronger business to survive. And it's unfair for most. But I think for sustainability, I like that a woman has to get into the business knowing that there is all these barriers. And it allows them to handle risk better. It allows them to go to market better. In fact, the female business might be there for hundreds of years as compared to the one that has more money from financing, because we kind of bootstrap with our savings and everything growing. It takes us a longer time to get there, and I would love for that period to be shortened, but it will take time. But we just need to build viable businesses that think of sustainability or as we continue to lobby for other things.
Thank you so much, Kitawa. I mean, I've learned so much. Your conversations have been really insightful. So before I open the floor for questions here and there, I am aware that you're very passionate about the culture of women being relegated to the background, and you've shared a little bit of that, but can you throw more light on how we can marry the culture and strategy team together?
I think it applies generally for just, I think on the issue of women and culture in Africa, that's a conversation that I need to just still dig deeper, because I don't understand where the ball dropped. Because Africans originally included women. The men included women at the table. And so I don't understand where that changed. And so I'm still on my quest to understand where that changed. But I think what I meant a lot when I did mention about culture and strategy, it's also just to see, for businesses looking to come to Africa, for businesses looking to grow in Africa, and businesses in Africa willing to grow to other countries in Africa, there's a deep understanding that we need to have of the culture and the culture of the people that we are. And I think that's something that has been a roadblock for growth, because a lot of people take up Africa as one country. No, we are not one country. We are 54 countries, and in the 54 countries, there is sub-countries. And I laugh and say, in Kenya alone, that's not really a big country. We have 44 tribes, And I look at my own tribe, which is Kisi, and within my tribe, there is sub-tribes. My father's people don't really understand my mother's people. And they're literally a 2-hour drive away from each other. So there is so much depth in terms of the culture. And for you to build a sustainable business, there has to be an understanding of that in your business. And I think one of my dreams and one of the things I've been talking about with Mama is hopefully to build a school, as a social business school for that, for people and in your country. So I feel that would be a 54 chapter more big brands come into Africa and never grow because Africa is a country. You know, we always laugh as different Africans when you go to global conferences and you say, "Hey, I'm from Kenya," and someone says, "Oh, you know," I'm like, you know, I don't know. Like, you could even ask me about someone in Nairobi, and I don't know who they are. So vast. So I always say, understand that is all fit, and we still have space to fit tiny countries from, I don't know, from Australia. So I'm just saying, so it is huge, and there's a deeper understanding that needs to come with that, and then you'll have the fun flair and, you know, and build a great business. And maybe for young entrepreneurs who are looking to build businesses in Africa, because now we are the final business frontier and everyone is fighting for Africa and it's the new scramble for Africa. I think we need to be more informed and we need to be smart in understanding how we will be able to marry our culture with businesses that we build for the future. So yes, that's something I'm really, really passionate about. And I think, understanding our roots is something that we need to put in business.
Kitawa, it's been amazing having you, really. Thank you so much. And then talking about asking people from your country if they know you, I might want to confess now, I'm so guilty. Just before this event, I sent your flyer and your picture to a friend of mine who's in Kenya and asked her if she knows you. You know, so we're so guilty. But thank you very much. What I learned now is that we need to understand our roots, our culture, to be able to build a bridge between culture and business, you know, to ensure that for our business to be able to thrive, not only in our cultural studies that needs to be done. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
so I'm going to leave the floor open. Do we have any questions? Joanne, do you have any contributions? Something to say?
Joanne is African by force. He comes from the 45th tribe of Kenya, or the 55th state of Africa.
Yeah! That was incredible, Kiki. That was amazing. What do I have to add? I loved what you said at the beginning about Africa always being a source for labor, like my ancestors who were taking from the western part of Africa and whatnot. And I think that's a really important point to make because I read something on LinkedIn yesterday he's actually Nigerian. What's his name? Most people love his stuff. And he made this point about Black Lives Matter. And he said that we need to look at the deeper issue, which is the African continent. And I started thinking, you know, obviously we know this. And when you said that, it's true. I think when people think of Africa, they think of people like me in the Caribbean and Brazil and the US. Our ancestors were robbed and we were enslaved and then it's wars in Africa. And so there's this whole image of the continent being this.
Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.